Well, welcome back to this edition of Covenant for New England, and we have with us tonight Barbara Lachance and Christopher Leighton with us. We're having a wonderful conversation regarding what God has been doing and will hopefully continue to do in New England, perhaps even in this nation. And I was saying, guys, that you are both examples of a time when God moved very powerfully in this nation toward revival, renewal, and visiting some very unlikely places, denominations that one normally wouldn't have associated with revival and renewal. And evidently God was moving in a very powerful way. My question is then, does He want to? We know that He can do it if He wants to, but does God want to do it now? And if so, what are we looking at in terms of revival? How will revival look now? And what does God, do you think, need to do at this time?
As we were describing churches in the 1970s, it was almost like God had been out of the church. Sounds strange, of course He wasn't, but you know, things were happening before in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s in parachurches or tent revivals, or shall we say free churches or Pentecostal churches. But this was the first time that it came into, in a big way, the denominations, and the church wasn't ready for it, but the church, many people in the church did respond, and a personal relationship with Jesus Christ became preeminent, number one. Been a lot of water over the dam since then. There have been a lot of battles for the Bible in denominations. Mainline churches now are sideline churches. They're old line churches, and God's been doing a lot of new work in newer and fresher churches, and the older kind of catching up, but it's sort of like the tension between the new wine and the new wineskin. Ultimately, you can't put the new wine in an old wineskin, Jesus said, because what happens during the fermentation process is the bag blows up, it bursts. And so, you know, you have to be ready in every season of new wine to provide a new wineskin.
So are denominations passé? Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't say that, because it's kind of like, you know, it's
obsolete.
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, people would say we're in a post-denominational age. I wouldn't say that, but they're changing. They're morphing. They need to change. God wants to keep people in revival. He doesn't want it to be a flash in the pan. He doesn't want someone to get saved and then just live like they never were. He wants them to have the support, the accountability of a long-term relationship with other people in Jesus Christ. And that's a parish, or that's a church, or, you know, it's not just a tent revival meeting. As important as that is, it's got to, how do we sustain, how does God sustain it? It's through a new wine in a new wineskin.
Yeah, any thoughts on that, Barbara?
Yeah, I kind of go along with what Christopher's saying very much, and I've been thinking and praying an awful lot about revival for a long time, actually for like 30 years. And I've been thinking about it, and I'm more interested in this. I'm thinking at the sustainability model and how we sustain what God is doing now more. I think we've had a lot of events up to this point, and the events are wonderful, and they've been powerful, and they've been motivational, and they get people very, very excited. But I want to see, what are we going to do to be able to sustain the move of God when it comes? So
you guys are thinking more of process as opposed to event. Is that
exactly
what you're
am,
suggesting?
yeah.
And well, I think Christopher's also saying in the sense of an ongoing thing. It's not the spectacular one-time God opening the sea.
Hopefully it'll be spectacular many times.
Yes, but you're talking about something that's long-term, systemic, process-oriented.
Yeah.
Relational.
Yes.
And that's why I think, for me personally, going into the Anglican Church with the accountability structure that they have, and with the new move in the Anglican Church, because they are evangelical, they are charismatic, and I'm learning to talk Anglicanism. What's the third thing?
Well, you might say universal.
Universal, yeah, Catholic, absolutely. That was the other word I was, with a small c. So, so if we have a structure, and what kind of a structure are we going to set up to sustain the move of God? I think when we were talking about the 7 mountains, you know, these 7 mountains of culture, which are family, religion, media, government, arts and entertainment, business, and I always miss one. But if in these 7 mountains, that's part, I think, of the sustainability.
Tell me a little bit more, for those viewers that are not necessarily familiar with that kind of language. give me just a couple of sentences about what we mean by those 7 mountains, and,
Well,
where does that term come, and what is the understanding behind that terminology?
Well, basically, it started with Bill Bright and Lauren Cunningham back in the 70s, and both of them got a revelation from God at the same time. Met for lunch the next day and said that we needed to be, as Christians, influence these spheres, be influencers in these spheres of influence. And they are the mind molders of society. And typically the church has always been involved in all of these, but we've really advocated our responsibility. And I think it goes back to Genesis 1:28 when Jesus said that we need to subdue the earth. And I'm not talking about dominion theology, I'm not talking about that. But I think that God is calling us to be influencers in all of these spheres. So does that give you a clear understanding?
No, great. Did you have something you wanted to add? I may have sidetracked you from your original thought.
No,
which is,
no.
I'd like to add on,
yeah.
When you talk about those spheres and the church's involvement, you know, in another time it may have been like the Roman Catholic Church or the Anglican Church or some sort of united effort. Now so many times it's individuals who are like leaven in the, you know, the dough, and their influence may be much greater in the marketplace or in the place of the arts or in their neighborhood or in sports or some other area, because their light is shining. And people, in the past, people came to our church. It was exciting. God was moving very powerfully in our church. Now our church is going out to these areas and bringing the light of Christ with them. And that's the exciting place, is where it's happening out there. And it's not come to church. It's more like, here, meet the person that makes me different. I'm a different hedge fund manager. Try to guess what the difference is.
Yeah. Well, you know what I find intriguing about both of your understandings of revival. Number one, I think it's this idea that revival is not an event. Or something that takes place that you can put through YouTube or you know, TBN, but it is a process that is sometimes hard to catalog and pinpoint where it's happening. So it is a process. So that means, of course, that it's a long-term kind of thing. And number three, I think one of the most powerful things that you're suggesting is that it is something that doesn't just happen within the church, and you know, we celebrate God expressing Himself through miracles and intensified worship and more passion for the Lord. But you're saying that revival also manifests itself in the world, and that means that He's going to be working through the structures of society. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I know some non-Christians who are more open to God than Christians are.
Well, that's a potentially heretical thought, but I think extremely powerful.
Well, what I would say is the Christian should be as open as that non-church person.
Yeah. No, I see
Okay,
what you're
now
saying.
I'll give you an example. These two women who are therapists came to us and said they wanted to use the. Shall I say? I'll save this for the next, because this will take a minute.
Yeah,
or two.
no, I think what you're leading to is very important. And so why don't we just take a break?
It's the church. It's the people in the church who are sometimes more opposed or close to a move of God than people in the world.
Yeah. Hold that thought, develop it in a second. We'll be back in half a minute, and thank you for staying with us.